Welcome. You're watching the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. Now, a day after the RBI issued pretty much a freeze on withdrawals above 1,000 rupees for the next 6 months from the Punjab and Maharashtra Cooperative Bank, the Minister of State Finance, Anurag Thakur, has said the government will ensure rights of depositors are protected. On the other hand, the Enforcement Directorate has filed a case against NCP Sharad Pawar in another cooperative bank scam. That's the Maharashtra Cooperative Bank scam. A move that Pawar says is politically motivated before the Maharashtra state elections. Now, whether the case against Pawar is motivated or not, the fact remains that several cooperative banks have escaped the scrutiny they deserve, in part because politicians, and I'm talking about politicians from every party, want to hold on to these cooperative banks and guard them. I may add that a lot of politicians have deep involvement in such banks. Even as depositors of PMC come to terms with feeling completely helpless, it's important to look at this angle today. It's also time to take a closer look at how these cooperative banks function. It's time to ask whether depositors should be punished this way for a possible lapse by bank managements. In the case of PMC, Punjab Maharashtra Cooperative Bank, were there overdrafts extended to bankrupt real estate firm HDIL that has led to this mess? It's been reported by newspapers including Mumbai Mirror. If so, did the auditors of PMC willfully hide the extent of rot in the bank, and will they be taken to task? Is it also time to de-link cooperative banks from the clutches of political players and bring them under more scrutiny instead of just waiting for the next cooperative bank to fail? Speaking to us on some of these issues today are Deepak Chinoy, founder of Capital Mind. Hemendra Hazari, banking expert, is joining me now as well on the show. Abhay Datar, consumer activist, and Vipin Malik, former director of the Reserve Bank of India. Welcome to all of you. I am also going to be hearing from those who have their money stuck in PMC. So do call in and tell us your story. We'll have those numbers on the screen for you shortly. Let me begin by speaking with Hemendra. Hemendra, what do you make of the situation? Because a lot of people today are wondering why the RBI had to act so harshly. I mean, you see the visuals of people in those bank branches. You have senior citizens almost, fainting in shock. There are people who are so upset. So the first question that comes to mind is that couldn't the depositors have been protected?
I think one must realize that whenever a bank is put under a moratorium, the RBI does not give advance notice to the public or to the depositors. Yeah. This is the way it happens, and therefore depositors have to be especially cautious where they put their deposits, because the RBI does not issue an ad before they put a bank under moratorium saying we are going to put a bank under moratorium, because immediately thereafter there is going to be a rush and a flight for deposits. So whichever bank has been put under moratorium, this is the way it happens. Now obviously and naturally the depositors after such an action are going to be extremely perturbed. But let me try to put this in perspective, that there is going to be short-term pain, and all depositors in this country are short of an insurance of 1 lakh per individual. And normally what the RBI does is that if they find that the bank is insolvent, they will normally merge it with a stronger bank so that all the depositors' interests are protected. But this is the way it is done. It cannot be done by RBI giving a warning beforehand.
No, I understand that, but can these depositors really hope to get their money soon enough or in a plausible time? Deepak, you've written a wonderful detailed piece today talking about, among other things, what happened in the Rupee Cooperation Bank, which had a similar situation 6.5 years ago. There's still no solution in sight, and that's the scary bit. And I also want to add before you start, what Hemendra is saying seems perfectly commonsensical, that the RBI can't have a run on a bank. But then is this the only alternative?
That's a good question, Tamanna. In fact, I'll tell you what the problem really stems from. It's like this, weird system between two types of banks. IOB had a 20% net gross NPA ratio. 20% of its loans were bad, and yet depositors were not told they can take only 1,000 rupees out. We had problems with a number of other banks where the NPAs were quite substantial. They were not told that PNB had this 12,000 crore fraud, and yet nobody was told, oh, listen, you can't take away all your money, but we'll give you a part of it. Why even bother with 1,000 rupees? It's a different question, of course. But you have a situation where you're getting a stepmotherly treatment in a way. Uh, One set of banks, the cooperative bank, although they are also scheduled banks, they also have bank insurance, and yet you have a system which suddenly cuts off depositors like this. It's an 11,500 crore bank. It's not a small bank. It's the size of Ujjivan Bank. It's a little bit smaller than Equitas Bank. So this is not a small bank that has gone down the drain just like this. It was audited 6 months ago, and 6 months ago, the NPA ratios revealed were only 2% net NPAs, so which is less than most public sector banks. And I see that the bank had a capital adequacy ratio of 12%, which is in comparison, PNB, even after its merger, will be only 7%, and 12% is quite healthy in the context of a bank. So what happened really, and then does it really warrant such a strict action immediately? I understand that you have to quell runs on a bank,
Yeah.
but to tell depositors they can get only 1,000 rupees, that they can potentially lose most of their money because we're not getting any communication from the RBI otherwise, is a little bit haphazard. I think this needs to be structured better. You need to give a stronger path to resolution. The Rupee Cooperative Bank, which went bust it went into directions in February 2013, 2 or 3 RBI governors ago, has not yet been resolved. On August 30th, they gave it another extension of 3 months with no end to sight. There is no resolution time frame. This insurance will kick in only after the direction period is over. So it could be 6.5 years and still your direction period is not over. You will not get this insurance that we talk about. So I think, overall it's been a communication failure. It is really a failure of telling people exactly when they should or when they will expect to get at least some part of their money back. 1,000 rupees is really not enough.
No, so they don't really know. I mean, we tried to get as much information as we could. We were the first to speak to Joy Thomas, the MD of PMC, and frankly, he didn't seem to have answers which would satisfy any customer. And we want to hear from you. Those numbers are on top of your screen. We want to hear from you. If you have money stuck, tell us your story as well. I want to get a voice in from Mr. Vipin Malik. Mr. Malik, thank you so much for speaking with us and give us some perspective from the RBI point of view. There are two things now. We know cooperative banks are under sort of joint custody, if I may put it. The state government also looks at their accounts and the RBI looks at it once a year. So, what happens is when you have joint custody, unless it's your own child, you tend to sort of skimp corners and look the other way. You perhaps don't check sometimes if the child is as neat and clean as he or she should be. I'm sorry, it might be a rubbish analogy, but I think you get the point I'm making. Is this dual responsibility the problem from the RBI side? And in this case, perhaps could more have been done in terms of scrutiny when NPAs is something the RBI is anyway working on?
Let me clarify that there is no question of joint custody between RBI and the state government. You see, private sector bank, public sector banks private sector banks is owned by the private sector, public sector banks are owned by the government of India. And cooperative banks are controlled and managed by the state governments. RBI role is only to do inspection, and after the inspection, whatever the inspection report is, there are serious irregularities and there are less serious irregularities. In this case, RBI must have found certain serious irregularities, and one of the serious irregularity which you have pointed out is that loan up to one HDIL and amounting to rupees 2,500 crores. A bank which has a net worth of 1,200 crores, because it's 300 crores is their capital and 900 crore is the 900 some crore is the their reserves. How a bank with a 1,200 crores capital can lend to one account as HDIL 2,500 crores?
Yeah,
that
has
itself
been
is
reported.
surprising.
No, but
so if it was discovered
Yeah.
that
Mr. Malik,
as has been reported, let me
Yes.
finish it.
Yes.
Let me finish it.
Yes, please.
Let me finish it, please. I mean, you can then, you see, RBI in the nationalized bank case, if you remember, very lately, I mean, few months back only, they have taken to few banks preventive corrective action. What was preventive corrective action for the nationalized banks? That was that they cannot lend or to advance further. But they have not passed any such thing on depositors because it was owned by the government, the banks are owned by the government. Here it is another preventive corrective action to the private sector bank, cooperative bank, which is owned by the state government. So this is part of the preventive corrective action, where they say instead of bank allowed to be failed, they said we are restricting this 1,000 withdrawal because we find that there is a asset liability mismatch.
Okay.
And they must have found a very big mismatch between assets and liabilities, as is the example given by you only,
Yes.
that a lending of HDIL of amounting to 2,500.
Okay. May I come in now?
Now you can ask me. any
Yes,
question.
sir. Thank you. So, you're referring to the prompt corrective action clearly, but the comparison seems a little dubious, if I may say, because in one case, the bank is penalized. In the other case, small depositors are penalized. And if you are saying that there is no joint custody in the sense the state government owns these banks, but it's the RBI coming in with the whip. So you can't have the power to whip something into shape when you have no responsibility. So just some clarity on those 2 points.
Madam, these are, I will call these state cooperative banks the political banks.
Yes.
Because there is a nexus between the politicians, the borrowers, the depositors and the lenders. This is a nexus of politicians. I call these are not state cooperative banks. These are political banks.
Absolutely.
So when you know it is a political bank, you should be careful about depositors.
Oh.
I mean, depositors should be careful that
No,
why
they
should
put it
they
on the
go
board outside.
to a
Abhay Datta, you're a
small
consumer activist.
cooperative
Please come in
political
on
bank.
this. If everyone knows it's a political cooperative bank, they should be careful. I'm saying then put it on the board that deposit your money here at your own risk. You're running under a banking license. Can the RBI wash its hands off today?
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Datta, that question's for you. Please come in.
Hello, as a consumer activist, I would, As a consumer activist, I would like to say whenever such incidents happen,
Yeah.
only the depositors are taken for ride. They are always caught unaware. And whether it is a dual custody or not is a totally different issue. But at least two systems are monitoring these cooperative banks. One from the state as well as another from Reserve Bank. So in fact, the cooperative bank should be more safe than any other bank. And one more issue is that the relation between the customers and the bank staff. Fortunately, in cooperative banks, the service is still considered as much better than other banks. That's why people get attracted to the cooperative banks. So it becomes a duty not only of the state government but also of RBI to see that proper check is kept, periodical checks, say 6 monthly or whatever it is, with the help of concurrent auditors and the auditors who are appointed to to audit all the accounts of these banks.
Yeah.
They should be published in the local newspapers to make aware the people, or like we can say rating. There are CRISIL and other rating companies in India. They should also rate these cooperative banks so people will become aware. This is A,
Mr.
triple
Datta,
A or B or what
I'm
like
just
that.
going to come in here. I've got on the phone line with me Mr. Abhishek Patankar, whose money is stuck in the bank. And I'm going to put all of these proposals to him, which we've talked about right now on the show. That please look at the financials of the company. You should know it's a political cooperative bank. Mr. Patankar, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Please tell us what your experience has been and what is your issue in the PMC case.
Okay, so I wanted to share that since last 25 years, my family's rupees 35 lakhs fixed deposit is in PMC Bank. Okay.
Yeah.
And what are the chances of recovery since the lifetime savings I have deposited in this bank since 1995.
Okay. Now, I'm of course going to ask, our a panelist to answer that, Abhishek. But I also want to ask you your response to some of the comments that are coming in today. And one of them is that why would you put your money in a cooperative bank? Everyone knows that there's political sort of, involvement, that the RBI doesn't back it as much as other scheduled banks. What do you say to all of these comments coming today?
Okay, so but I had one more question. Like, if RBI has kept a watch on irregular transactions of PMC Bank for past 2 years, then why has the RBI not alerted to the bank customers?
Yeah, exactly. Because they don't want to run on the bank. So what does someone like Mr. Patankar do, whose entire family wealth of 35 lakhs is over here? Deepak, you want to come in on some of the problems that Mr. Patankar is speaking about and some of the comments we've heard. It seems to be a situation where you're blaming depositors and account holders. My point is, if something is open for business, given a license by a government agency, I assume it's it's fit to take my business.
No, absolutely, it's a scheduled bank. It is in the RBI second schedule, protected by what I mean. It is not something that RBI can say it does not have complete regulation of, because if it did not have regulatory control, then how is it imposing this restriction on this bank in the first place? But there are some other issues over here as well. I mean, how much will you recover? The bank has about 3,000 crores in government bonds out of a total 11,600 crores of deposits as of March this year. Assuming they've continued that ratio, there's roughly 20 to 25% that is guaranteed in government bonds. So that means depositors should be sure that at least 20 to 25% of them will come back for sure. I don't think RBI has made this clear, but looking at the financials, that seems to be at least one point of, one little hope over there. Secondly, if the bank is merged with another cooperative bank or another public bank, it is quite likely that all depositors will receive all of their money. This could take some time, but it has happened in the past. Even in the case of GTB, where a lot of losses were foreseen, not one depositor had to take a loss. Every shareholder lost money. It's a different point. Equities are risky, we know that, but not one depositor had to take a loss. So we have had precedents where situations like this have arisen, where things have happened. Okay, what if the bad thing happens? You're guaranteed up to 1 lakh, and if in a few months, hopefully within a few months, this will come into a point where either it's liquidated or it's resolved. Resolved is okay, you'll receive all your money back. If it's liquidated, then you're guaranteed 1 lakh rupees at least from the DICGC, which is the Deposit Insurance Guarantee Corporation, and you will get that. And we have seen there is an online site, I think it's dicgc.org.in, where they talk about past resolutions and past liquidations, and as early as of March this year, there was another liquidation where depositors were paid 1 lakh rupees or their deposits whichever were lower. So okay. I hope this assuages some part of him, but I don't think this will help him that much.
I think it's also important to put this in perspective. Maharashtra elections are around the corner, and this is a good opportunity to put pressure on the state government to act and make sure these people get their money back. That's the real situation. Hemendra Hazari, just your take on the role of the auditor over here, because like we've said before, this bank, their books look not that bad. So where is this big overdraft, NPA, perhaps to HDIL as this report coming from, and should the auditors then not be taken to task?
See, if anyone has gone through my research, which I publish, you will know that I have a very, very poor opinion of these auditors, however big or small they may be, because invariably I find when I do my research that the accounts do not show a true and fair view. In fact, sometimes they show a very unfair view. And normally what we have seen is that the auditors get away scot-free. Therefore, I am very thankful that the RBI and even SEBI has taken some very strict action against some of these large audit firms, because in this case and in many of such cases, they are all complicit. They are complicit with the management, the auditor, the independent directors, and also like to add, even the media does not sound the early warning that it should sound. But this is our system today, where everyone wallows in the same cesspool. So all those people, the sentinels, who are supposed to sound the warning bells, they don't, because they're all sleeping in the same dirty bed.
Who is going to sound the warning on PMC? The numbers don't even look that bad, Hemendra. In this case, you have to admit that this one, no, if anyone.
But that is the role of the media or the role of the auditors, right? We have to, and the role of the analysts.
It's the role of the RBI. Who has access to the accounts? The state government and the RBI. Who has access to the accounts? I mean, let's be fair here.
I do agree that the RBI has its share to blame, most definitely. But it is the role of everybody involved in this, all the watchdogs, the media, the auditors cannot put up their hands and say, oh, it was a cooperative bank, no one looks at it. All of us have to be on our guard all the time, because what I've seen around the financial and the private corporate sector, that is, accounts cannot be trusted.
Okay, no, I take that point. I take the broader point you're making, but I want to look at this from the depositor's point of view today, who may care two hoots about whose responsibility is and who was not the watchdog and who was in which cesspool. That person, he or she, is just wondering when they're going to get their money. My simple question is that they may not have been in this situation were this a bigger scheduled or public sector bank. Should cooperative banks A have this step treatment, and if they are creatures of a lesser financial god, then shouldn't potential depositors be warned well in advance कि यहाँ पर पैसा डालना जोखिम है, उसमें डालने में जोखिम है. You should print it on the boards and put it out there, and not wait for them to read some obscure financial document at home.
See, if you do that, there will be immediately a run on that entity, on that bank, which may trigger off, a systemic run. So I think what depositors must do is diversify their deposits. And whenever you deposit money in a bank which offers you a higher rate than what you're getting in other banks, instead of rushing there, you should ask, why are they offering me a higher rate of interest? Isn't it, they are also doing higher risk.
Everything
so
you're
the
saying
depositor
is right.
has, because finally it is the depositor's money.
Yeah, everything you're saying is right, Hemendra, but it is so divorced from the reality of who these depositors are. I'm just going to run the pictures of some of those depositors in the branches, and if we have some clips from them, we'll get all of you to hear it as well. You're talking about the kind of financial literacy which doesn't exist. And I'm not saying have a run on any bank, but Deepak, you have actually suggested that if you have money in cooperative banks, think about it again.
Why? If the answer to having bad NPAs for a PNB is okay, don't worry. If the answer to a bad NPA in Indian Overseas Bank is okay, don't worry. But in a cooperative bank, it is like, okay, shut down everything. We're not giving you more than 1,000 rupees. My point is then go to the other banks. No, why you want to put your money in cooperative banks? I mean, I want this to cause people to move out of cooperative banks, so that the government will and the RBI together sit down and say, listen, we have to protect the banks the same way we protect the larger banks. So we want to remove the concept of a cooperative bank, and everything should be a bank that's managed by the RBI the same way. If it needs a run to do it, it sometimes takes a crisis for the governments to act. Perhaps it took a crisis for the government to reduce the tax rates. then why shouldn't let there be a crisis that will force the RBI and
Yeah,
the
why is this not a
government to act?
crisis? Absolutely, absolutely. Why is this not a crisis? The reason we're raising this question is maybe it's time to clean up the whole system of cooperative banks, remove it from the clutches of political interference if you think that's the reason that they lend to, I thought the era of phone banking had ended, so let's stop it at cooperative banks as well. If there's still a risk, then warn people. It's not fair to let them do that. I want to thank all of you for joining us on Debate 1. Before we take a break and come back with our IDD special Road to $5 trillion, I have a very special guest today, Montek Singh Ahluwalia. I want to leave you with a voice of one of the people who finds themselves completely stuck today. Imagine if it was you. See you on the other side of the break.
जो मेरा रिटायरमेंट का जो आया था पैसा वो 14 लाख में यहाँ रख देंगे और मैं अभी सोचा अभी ये जो पैसा है उसका इंटरेस्ट यहाँ सेविंग में जमा करूँ और मैं मेरा पॉलिसी वगैरह है वहाँ यहाँ से चेक में देता था समझा और बाद में अभी समझो मेरा लड़के का शादी है तो यहाँ से पैसा निकाल के मैं शादी करवाना चाहता था और समझो कुछ मेरा भी ये टीथ का जो प्रॉब्लम है मुँह में तो वो भी यहाँ से मैं खर्चा लेके मैं करता था लेकिन अभी प्रॉब्लम हो गया अभी क्या करेगा उसके लिए कोई नहीं कुछ नहीं कोई सपोर्ट नहीं कर पाएगा कोई नहीं कर पाएगा मैं घर में ही हूँ और ऐसे ही मैं मतलब लड़के लोगों को मैं ट्रेन करता हूँ जिम में मैं जिम ट्रेनर हूँ लेकिन कोई पैसा मैं नहीं लेता ऐसे मैं जिम सिखाता हूँ वो बहुत बेकार है ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए मैं समझा कि मेरे औरत बोली कि रोज़ 1000 निकल सके रोज़ तो ये बोलते रोज़ नहीं 6 महीने में अभी 1,000